Story 1. This story takes place a couple of years ago at a resort with a pool that had a decent number of suns, not enough for every guest to use one at the same time, but sufficient since not everyone spends their entire day by the pool. The resort had clear signs stating that reserving suns by leaving towels on them was not allowed. However, as you might guess, not everyone followed that rule. At the resort, guests were not permitted to use the white towels from their rooms at the pool. Instead, we had the option to either bring our own towels or borrow the resort's green pool towels by paying a refundable $10 deposit. One morning, I went to the pool after breakfast and noticed that about half the suns were occupied by green towels. There were no personal items like books, flip-flops, or beach bags, nothing that would suggest someone had just stepped away for a swim or a drink. Over the next few hours, as the pool area got busier, more people arrived, only to find there were no available suns. Despite this, many of the reserved suns remained empty. Some of their so-called owners would show up later, stay for an hour, and then leave, while the towels remained to hold their spot. After a couple of days of seeing this inconsiderate behavior, I decided enough was enough. I began moving towels from suns that had been unused for hours. I placed the towels in other areas of the resort where staff could easily find them, or discreetly drop them into the laundry bags of the room cleaners when no one was looking. I hoped that by doing this, those guests who had disregarded the rules lost their deposits and learned not to hog shared facilities they weren't actively using. Story 2. Context. I am a professional attorney wrangler for a big legal firm. If you've watched Suits, I'm Donna if she was wound tighter than a child's music box. As a legal admin, I have to keep a tremendous amount of information straight. Every county in every state has their own court system, their own rules, and their own idiosyncrasies. I have 5 attorneys on my team. Despite the TV shows, it's pretty unusual for a lawyer to have a special secretary all their own, unless they are very important, so 5 is a solid number. Because of the nameless death that took over the world last year, a secretary that left in January 2020 has not been replaced yet, and I've been babysitting one of the partners, Bingley, in the meantime. It's been a fun learning opportunity, as Bingley works for an entirely different region and type of law than the rest of my team. Also, he has a case where a truck exploded was empty, which is awesome. Story. My manager, Lady Catherine, is the worst. You know the type, she plays favorites. Her best loved word is no. She must be involved in every conversation because she is just that important and necessary. We don't get along, because I am a stubborn know-it-all who's been proven right a few too many times. Highlights include forbidding me from using the same resources other admins had access to on her orders, including backup admins when my workload was too big, and then denying my overtime requests. I literally had no way to do my job some days. It's worth noting that the reason Bingley's secretary left was specifically because of Lady Catherine. In fact, 4 additional admins quit over the year explicitly because of her. Anyway, at this point, I'd been working with Bingley for almost a year. It was November 2020, and we'd settled into a pretty good routine. I'd gotten used to filing pleadings in a different state, and no longer needed to double-check all my work for nuance. Because law still operates in the Stone Ages, a few states still require hard copy filing. Anything we want the judge to read has to be sent by actual mail, on actual paper, to arrive in the judge's actual hands. It's a pain. Most states let you file electronically, but whatever. Bingley mostly only has cases in one of the hard copy states. Lady Catherine, in her excessive wisdom, butted in uninvited and instructed me to include a cover letter when mailing a new filing. This confused me, as I had been filing for almost a year, and no one, including the admin who originally trained me, had mentioned a cover letter. I told her this, and she basically told me to suck it up. I called the court admin to make sure I wasn't crazy and that I hadn't ruined a year's worth of filings, and the court admin literally laughed and said to please not include a cover letter ever. So I didn't. Imagine my surprise when Lady Catherine called me, writing me up for insubordination. Even knowing the court rules and the judge and the court admin explicitly said to not send a letter, She was right because she is always right and I am, and I quote, a disrespectful little jerk, and she was tired of me. A warning went into my employee file, pending disciplinary measures. The next day, she emailed my team telling them to reduce my score on my yearly review, as she knew I had been rated too highly for what my abilities really are. It felt to me like she was preparing to fire me by creating a history of poor performance. Well, if you're so tired of me, Madam Manager, I can leave. Within a week of looking, I found a new position. Now, here's the issue. I love my team very much. This is the best work team I've ever been on. We take each other seriously, and we genuinely love each other. A lot of times admins get pushed around because we don't have fancy degrees, but not here. Calling in to quit, I cried. I cried a lot. I cried to the point that one of the partners, Bennett, asked if I wanted a counteroffer. I said no, because that wouldn't solve anything. He asked what I meant. I told him. I told him about the write-up. I told him how she was trying to falsify my employee review after it had been submitted. I told him the reason 5 admins had left. I told him about how I wasn't allowed to ask for help. At this point, I had given myself hiccups from weeping, and one of the partners on my team, Gardner, was calling him asking if he and his workload were the reasons I was leaving. So Bennett let me go do other things, like day drink and create a shrine out of legal forms. I thought it was the end of it, until a friend in another office, Charlotte, called me asking WTF I was doing. She doesn't have time to train someone into being the new me, and I was the only admin she actually trusts in my office, so why was I leaving her all alone? I told her, and she told Gardner, and together they plotted. First, Charlotte is the manager in her office, so she is on equal footing with Lady Catherine. They also report to the same person. Charlotte called the district manager and told him that Lady Catherine was driving admins away and that the most recent quitter, me, was the only person who knows how to do a lot of the work on my teams, and my loss was a serious blow. Apparently this is true, which is both heartwarming and terrifying. Meanwhile, Gardner called up a fellow partner and told her that his world would collapse in on itself if I left. He would go to the nearest bridge and jump off it, which would be pretty impressive in a landlocked state. They had to do something. I got a call the next day from Bennett, saying they had a counter-offer they were really hoping I'd take. Basically, instead of Lady Catherine, I would report directly to Gardner. Lady Catherine would be forbidden from interfering with me without first asking Gardner for his permission. This solved the issue and I got to stay with my team, so I happily accepted. I thought the debacle was over. The debacle was not over. Unbeknownst to me, after looking at the evidence, exit interviews, emails, memos, Bennett put Lady Catherine on a performance improvement plan, and she did not get an end-of-year bonus or raise. Turns out I had been absolutely correct. Lady Catherine's behavior and treatment had been the explicit cause that 6 secretaries quit in less than a year. I got a call last week from Charlotte. I figured she wanted to gossip about coworkers or rant about how a shared client is a big headache, but it was actually to give me a heads up. Lady Catherine had been stripped of her management duties. I no longer had any contact with her, which was great, but it also meant I didn't see that her behavior had actually doubled down on the admins unfortunate enough to still be under her thumb. She had missed every single one of the benchmarks on her performance improvement plan. Charlotte had called me to ask my opinion on who should be the new manager, as I know everyone, and she was helping cover some things as an outside manager. Now, I know some of you are thinking, yes, become the manager and fire Lady Catherine. But I am not a sadist. I want to stay on my team and do what I do best, which is being a cheerfully annoying, respectful little jerk. I told her one of the more senior admins would probably need some guidance, but would be amazing at it. No one has to deal with Lady Catherine anymore. She is now a mere paralegal and not anyone's manager at all. If she had just left me alone and not interfered where she wasn't needed, none of this would have happened. All she had to do was nothing. Story 3. There seemed to be a lot of posts about wanting to take legal action against an HOA, but very few actually do it. So I thought I would share my story. This is not legal advice. I've been in my HOA for approximately 15 mostly drama-free years until a few years ago when the HOA changed management companies. The new one decided that they were going to be more proactive in enforcement of violations. Not that things were going downhill, they were not. Everyone's home has basically doubled in value over the last few years. They are well-maintained, nice, newer homes in a desirable area. The new PMC Prop MGMT Co. got the board to adopt new rules and regs and new bylaws. The board has essentially been controlled by one old lady for about 10 years. I'll call her Karen. Karen has never liked me and about 6 other families in the neighborhood, and we suspected all along that she would use the new rules to target those she didn't like, which is exactly what happened. Some time later that year we started getting violation notices via email. For stupid crap. One was for a package left on the porch. One was for a bag of mulch left out. No fines yet, but that came soon enough. Around the same time, we decided to paint our house. Part of the process to have the color approved is you have to paint a 3 square on the front so the ARC can look at it. They rejected it. So we painted another one, resubmitted it, and waited, and waited, and waited. They never approved or denied the second color, so we waited for the 30-day clock to run out, after which you can assume approval. Then the fines started. With no warning, we got an email stating that we had been fined for having mismatched paint. Yes, they were fining us for painting the squares that they require in order to approve a color. We were also fined for having Christmas lights in the summer. There have never been Christmas lights on our house. This was likely an address mix-up. We complained on the HOA's website, but were banned immediately. So far this was all done via email. But to appeal a fine you have to send a certified letter to the PMC, which we did, but in the meantime we spoke to a lawyer who specializes in HOA law. He reviewed our DCCR and all other docs and gave us this advice for the appeal. Just politely say that you do not think that the board has the authority to issue fines. That's it. Don't get into anything further. That's exactly what we did, and the board was gobsmacked at our gall to question their omnipotence and our non-participation in their appeal. They upheld the fines as expected, which made our lawyer very happy. We also learned that someone else had been fined for having too many cars, and someone else got a mowing fine that was intended for their neighbor. This PMC was completely incompetent. Add a fair dose of malice from Karen and indifference from the other board members, and you have a recipe for a mess. What we knew, but apparently they didn't, is that HOAs and TX do not have a statutory authority to levy fines. That power must be granted in the restrictive covenants, and ours did no such thing. There is also a law, which among other things, states that before fines can be issued the HOA must send a certified letter to the owner giving them an opportunity to cure the violation. They hadn't. 209 also states that all board meetings must be open to all owners, and any meeting where rules, regs, or bylaws are going to be discussed must be noticed to all homeowners. They didn't do any of that. The HOA was levying fines with zero authority to do so, ignoring state law that dictates how HOAs must issue fines if they have the authority, adopting rules and regs in secret meetings in violation of state law, changing bylaws in secret meetings in violation of state law. We had them dead to rights, and everyone knew it. TX also has a law that grants attorneys fees to the prevailing party in a suit about violations of restrictive covenants. This usually benefits the HOA but can work both ways. Our fantastic attorney wrote a devastating but absolutely beautiful complaint. It was pure poetry, and I should have it framed. It was served on the board and PMC. I don't know what went on behind the scenes, but I imagine it was pure panic once they spoke to a lawyer who told them they were totally screwed. A few weeks later, we heard that Karen and a couple other board members had decided that they were just too busy to continue serving on the board and sadly had to step down. There was an election, and now the board is controlled by the very people who had been targeted by their BS fines. The HOA lawyer asked to settle. We asked for refund all fines, late fees, and penalties ever issued to anyone over a violation plus interest. The PMC can no longer have anything to do with violations. They can only do administrative things. Revoke all actions taken by the board in the last 4 years. Add a term limit that prevents Karen from running again for 10 years. It doesn't name her, but is worded so that it only applies to her. And of course pay all of our legal fees. We could have gone further, but at this point the bad board members had fled the scene, so we would just be inconveniencing people who had been on our side all along. This was an epic smackdown of an HOA Karen who, because no one ever questioned her authority, had gotten way out over her skis, and it felt really good to see her smug self crash and burn. But a few words of caution are needed. If the HOA had decided to fight, there is a 50-50 chance that we would have lost at the district court level. This is because NTX judges are elected, and the HOA lobby Kai is a huge contributor. Many district court judges will grant summary judgment against any homeowner regardless of the facts. We eventually would have won on appeal, but we had to be prepared to go the distance and pay up to $20K or more out of pocket, knowing that eventually we would get it back. And no, HOA lawyers do not work on contingency, and they are expensive AF. Another word of caution for anyone considering legal action: make sure that you have a lawyer who specializes in HOA law, not real estate law, not your cousin's college roommate who just passed the bar. The deck is stacked against the homeowner, and even with a slam dunk case, it could be ruinously expensive if the HOA decides to go the distance just to screw you over. You are spending your own money to fight. The HOA is also spending your money and that of your neighbors and their insurance company to fight back. A large HOA could spend $100K plus and make you do the same just to make an example out of you. You need a lawyer who has done exactly this before and knows HOA law inside and out. At the end of the day, you have to weigh the cost and benefit of a lawsuit just like anything else. In my case, it was worth it because we don't plan to move, and this was the only way guaranteed to stop the nonsense and get the HOA back on the rails. Story 4. So this story takes place like 5 years ago, when my husband and I were broke college students with a young baby. We worked hard to afford our crappy little duplex $600/month and necessities, while trying to finish our degrees to one day get ahead. Our duplex was one in an entire neighborhood owned by a large company and managed by a super sketchy married couple who lived on the same street. Before our kid was born, we did the normal excited new parent thing of painting his nursery and decorating, blah blah. Our lease stated we needed permission to paint, which we obtained from the property manager, the husband of the couple. He insisted it would be fine, and, being young and naive, we didn't get it in writing because he was so chill about it. So we paint and move on with our lives. A little while later our lease was up, and we had given notice to vacate as we were moving closer to my husband's school. The property manager was understanding, everything was fine, and we scheduled our move-out inspection. Prior to this inspection, we specifically asked him for the name of the paint color we needed to use when repainting the nursery. He flat out refused to give it, saying it was unnecessary to paint as we'd been there so long, they'd be painting the whole duplex anyway. Okay, cool. Move-out inspection day comes and goes. We left the house in better shape than we found it, aside from a small area of torn carpet right along a seam in a doorway. The property manager inspected and said everything looked great, and we should get our whole deposit $400 back minus a few bucks for the torn carpet. Sounds good, boss. Enter a period of weeks where we waited and waited for our deposit, eventually leaving messages upon messages with false promises or no return calls at all. Eventually, over a month later, this culminated in a phone call with the property manager where he said, and I remember this almost verbatim, "I don't know what you're so worried about anyway. It's only like $200 you're getting back." He cited the painted nursery and the huge mess left behind as deductions. And I coldly informed him we'd be going to court then because we didn't feel we owed. For those reasons, the place was spotless when we left. Aside from the 6-pack of beer we left him in the fridge for being chill. Not 1 hour later, he called back and miraculously our refund check had just shown up in the mail. Already knowing he was trying to screw us, we installed a recording app on my phone, one-party consent state, and went to the office. The check indeed was only for $200 of our deposit, and included no list of what they charged us for important detail. We intentionally goaded him into admitting that he had told us not to paint and that the house looked great on move-out, and went on our happy way, revenge plan already unfolding. We didn't cash the check and instead emailed the CEO of the entire property company, copying in the property manager and detailing the entire process. The CEO sent back a witty email with a cute little typed-up list of deductions, including all the things we were specifically told we wouldn't be on the hook for. A fun detail was that even by his own math, they owed us $230 of our deposit. No one really had an answer for why they then tried to issue a check for $200, but whatever. Joke was on him, because we began digging through all the state regulations on security deposits and refunds, hoping to prove that our length of stay meant he couldn't charge us for wear and tear things like carpet cleaning, etc. And in our search, we instead happened upon a statute requiring landlords to return security deposit refunds and an itemized list of deductions within 30 days, or lose the right to withhold for actual damages and be subject to treble damages if the landlord is thought to be maliciously withholding the refund. So we typed up a demand letter for our entire security deposit, citing the statute which he had broken because we didn't receive any refund offer or itemized list until 6 weekends later. And when he sent a witty reply, we filed in small claims court for our entire deposit plus treble damages and court costs. Now, I don't know if it's clear at this point, but I can be really petty if I feel like someone is trying to screw with me. And it was clear this guy made a career out of stealing money from low-income renters who likely could never afford to fight it. I was pissed. I spent the next month before our court date compiling all email correspondence in which he'd screwed himself over numerous times by providing written documentation that he exceeded time limits, charged incorrect amounts, etc. I also compiled phone records showing dozens upon dozens of unanswered and unreturned calls to the property manager and detailed accounts I'd made immediately after hanging up on lies from the property manager. I printed out a screenshot from the company's own website detailing the CEO's role as the legal advisor so I could innocently claim. Shouldn't he have known the statutes for these issues? I printed all the relevant statutes and highlighted the important parts. And then I made 3 copies of everything and nicely compiled each in a binder complete with sleeve protectors and page numbers, one for our own reference, one for the jerk property manager and/or CEO, we weren't sure who would show up, and one for the judge himself. We also took our handy little recording of the property manager admitting to all the nonsense he lied about and then pretended to have never said. Needless to say, the judge laughed at how prepared we were, asked if we were law students, and then awarded us treble damages and court fees as well as interest. I will never forget the CEO's face when we looked over and smiled at him. All his crappy emails and disregard for the law were on the table, and rather than giving us the original $350 or so we were promised from our deposit, he ended up paying us over $1,300 a month later. It was glorious. Story 5. I work at a large retail chain where the stockroom is a whirlwind of activity, and chaos feels like the norm. Recently, we got a new supervisor named Sarah, who seems to think she's running a military boot camp. Her main focus? Speed. She constantly pushes us to work faster, regardless of whether things are done correctly, as long as they're done quickly. One day, during a particularly hectic restock period when we were overwhelmed with boxes, Sarah came storming into the stockroom. Clipboard in hand and her "I'm in charge" demeanor on full display, she approached me while I was carefully conducting a detailed inventory check. "You're taking way too long," she said curtly. "Just get through them quickly. We don't have time to check every single item." I tried to explain that rushing through inventory checks could lead to errors, but she cut me off with a condescending smile. "If you can't speed this up, maybe this job isn't the right fit for you," she said smugly, clearly convinced she'd just delivered a life-changing revelation. "All right, Sarah, if speed is what you want, let's see how that works out." The next day, I was assigned another inventory check. Usually, I take my time to carefully count each item, ensuring accuracy. But this time I decided to follow Sarah's instructions to the letter. Instead of my normal thorough process, I glanced at the shelves and made up numbers that seemed about right. I didn't even bother opening the boxes to confirm the contents. What normally takes 2 hours, I finished in just 20 minutes. Sarah noticed and immediately lit up with enthusiasm. "See, that wasn't so hard, was it? If you keep this up, you might even get a little bonus this month," she said, clearly patting herself on the back for her leadership. Fast forward a week, and the store manager, Mike, called an emergency meeting. The inventory reports were in, and they were a complete disaster. Thousands of dollars worth of products were unaccounted for, making it look like we either lost half our stock or were running some kind of underground operation. Customers were complaining about items being out of stock, and the regional manager was putting immense pressure on Mike to figure out what went wrong. During the meeting, Mike turned to Sarah, demanding an explanation. Sarah, desperate to save face, immediately pointed fingers at the team. "They must have messed up the counts," she said. "They weren't thorough enough." This was my moment. I raised my hand and calmly said, "Actually, I followed Sarah's instructions exactly. She told us to skip checking the items and just get through it as quickly as possible. I was just doing what she asked." You could hear a pin drop. Mike slowly turned to Sarah, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. "Is this true?" he asked, his tone sharp. Sarah stammered. "Well, I didn't mean skip entirely. I just meant to speed it up." But it was too late. The damage was done. Mike was furious. "So you decided to cut corners on the one process that directly impacts our bottom line. Do you realize we'll need to do a full recount because of this?" he said. And that's exactly what happened. The next day, Sarah and a few unlucky team members spent 12 hours redoing the entire inventory check from scratch. The rest of us continued with our regular duties, enjoying the rare sight of Sarah actually sweating over a task. As they worked, I made a point of casually walking by and asking, "Need any help speeding things up? I could skip a few checks for you if that helps." The look on Sarah's face each time was a mix of embarrassment and irritation, but she couldn't say anything without admitting her mistake. By the end of the recount, we uncovered thousands of dollars in discrepancies. Unsurprisingly, rushing through inventory checks left room for plenty of errors. Who would have thought? The regional manager wasn't happy, and Sarah received a formal warning for her actions. From that point on, she stopped pushing us about speed and even went out of her way to be overly polite whenever I was around. The best part: a few weeks later, I received a small bonus for outstanding attention to detail in helping resolve the inventory issue. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Sarah couldn't even look me in the eye when I received the bonus slip. Now, every time she walks by, I give her a friendly smile and say, "Don't worry, boss, I'm working as fast as you want." Story 6. For reference, my family is a tight-knit, good, loving Christian family. However, I am feeling betrayed due to my younger brother abusing my parents' kindness. He gets anything he wants pretty much, while I have to work my rear off. I saved up for 5 years to buy a lawn mower to earn more money, and bought my very own virtual reality headset for $300 a year later. However, my parents manipulated me into letting my brother use it, and then he broke it. I was devastated beyond belief. I told my parents that he needed to pay for it. They initially agreed, but instead just let him off with a talking to, and my parents bought me a new one. To add salt to the wound, they bought him a better headset with guards and extra battery for $800 for his birthday, while I was always told anything above $100 would have to be my own money. I fixed up a computer I bought over the course of a year, and my parents got my brother a brand new personal computer for nearly $1,000 spontaneously a few weeks later. I buy a phone. My brother gets a phone with unlimited data and arcade subscription. I pay for a $60 World of Warcraft subscription. My brother gets it for free and never uses it. I buy a game. He gets the same game for free. I got a new monitor, He gets a new monitor for free. It might not be so bad if it weren't for the fact that he also does no housework. My parents help some, but a lot gets pushed to me that my brother is supposed to do. My brother got a dog, which I'm allergic to, and my parents justified it because they gave me a beat-up old Ford Ranger that still doesn't work a year later. I had to get an allergy test, which put me out of school for 2 weeks. I now had to make up tons of schoolwork, keep up with Invisalign, do most of the indoor and outdoor chores, but my parents still complain I'm in my room too much. This is despite the fact that my brother was failing 3 classes with 0% grades for months, and he gets to stay in his room on his virtual reality headset all day. I get sick often due to a weak immune system. The only way I'm allowed to stay home is if I throw up or am in severe pain. He gets to stay home if he has a runny nose. I had to drop Boy Scouts of America due to stress and replaced it with more Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps, and my parents let him quit Boy Scouts of America with nothing replacing it. He also was allowed to quit Bible study on Wednesdays too. He throws a toddler-like tantrum of stomping around, yelling, crying, and slamming doors when he is told to do anything other than what he wants. My parents justify this nonsense by saying they're preparing me to be tougher in the real world. I try to respect their wishes and have never even talked back, let alone argued. However, I've reached my breaking point today as I am being told I have to move my personal computer out of my clean room into the allergy-infested basement where it was originally until my brother got a dog. They say it's so they can monitor my screen time, while I can hear my brother in his room still on his virtual reality headset. As an introvert, my last bastion of solitude is just some models and books in a small room, since my phone isn't allowed in here, but it is in my brother's room. I'm at a complete loss as to what to do. My parents aren't classic abusive individuals, but fairly reasonable people, except when it comes to my brother. Words have more of an effect on me than they do on him, but my brother just gets angry and storms off. I'm fairly certain my parents believe my introverted nature is something that needs to be fixed, rather than adapted to. My brother is a party-loving jokester like my parents that I'm guessing is what my parents believe I should be. My parents treat me like a disappointment, trying to eke more out of me so I can be better in their own eyes. I never get my way, just some sort of compromise between what I want and what they want. Like I said earlier, my computer returns to the basement today. My brother still gets to keep his stuff in his room, and off to the curb I go. I might post about my introvert issues elsewhere on here, but for now I don't know what to do. Note: I've maintained the original word count, corrected grammatical and punctuation errors, removed expletives, expanded acronyms, and separated the text into more readable paragraphs. Story 7. Many years ago, I was at a popular bar in my hometown on a Saturday afternoon. I was sitting alone at a bench table, enjoying my beer and burger while watching an international rugby game. The bar was quite busy, and it wasn't uncommon for people to share tables. A man and his 2 friends approached and asked if they could join me while waiting for another table. Since it was a sports bar and the atmosphere was casual, I didn't mind. They sat down, and I assumed that would be the extent of it. However, things took an unexpected turn. The other table they were waiting for opened up, but instead of moving there, 10 more of their friends arrived. The man then asked me to leave the table so they could all sit together. I declined, explaining that I was there to watch the game and wasn't planning on moving. As a result, I found myself tightly squeezed at the table, which we'll call Table 21. Despite this, I decided to stay and enjoy the game. As the group got louder and ordered more food and drinks, I noticed an opportunity. When I went to the bar to get another drink, the bartender asked which table I was at. I casually responded, Table 21. From that point on, whenever a waiter brought orders to the table, I'd quietly confirm with them and say, "Did you get the specific drink or the steak?" This made it seem like I was part of the group, and they unknowingly added my items to their bill. Over the course of the next 7 hours, while the festivities continued, I managed to enjoy 7 drinks, 3 starters, and an additional main dish, all while only paying for my original order of 1 beer and a burger. When it was time to leave, I went to settle my bill. The receipt only included my initial beer and burger, amounting to $20. The additional food and drinks I had enjoyed, totaling $50, were left on the group's tab. I paid for my original order and left the bar feeling quite amused by how the day had turned out.